Imagine being so rich, so powerful, so untouchable that you've got 30 pickup trucks and 60 armed soldiers surrounding your cabin on a Tuesday. That is not a movie scene. That is not a drill. That is literally the real life of the man we're talking about today. Audius Flores Silva, better known to the world as Eljardinero, the gardener. The man who was quietly running one of the most dangerous criminal empires on the entire planet, sitting on aircraft, luxury ranches, private boats, tequila companies, and doing all of it in complete silence while governments across 2 countries spent years just trying to figure out where he was sleeping at night. And here's the wild part. This man, with all of that, got caught hiding in a ditch on the side of the road. But we're going to get to that, because before we talk about how it ended, we got to talk about how he lived. Because the lifestyle of Eljardinero is one of those stories that makes you sit back and go, how is this real? How is this happening? And how did one man climb all the way to the top of the most powerful cartel in Mexico without most of the world even knowing his name? Let's get into it. Starting things off with Audius Flores Silva, because this man is genuinely one of the most underreported figures in the entire history of organized crime. And that, honestly, was by design. Born on November 19, 1980, in Huetamo, Michoacan, a small town in western Mexico, Flores Silva didn't grow up with a silver spoon. Michoacan, for those who don't know, is one of the most cartel-saturated states in all of Mexico. It's the birthplace of multiple criminal organizations and has been a recruiting ground for cartels for decades. So the environment that shaped this man was already primed for exactly the kind of life he ended up living. Now, the name Eljardinero, the gardener, might sound calm, peaceful even. But don't let the nickname fool you for a single second. In cartel culture, these nicknames often carry a dark irony. This wasn't a man known for growing roses. This was a man who cultivated something far more dangerous: power, territory, and one of the most elaborate criminal financial networks that Mexican law enforcement had ever encountered. He also went by El Comandante, El Bravo II, Audi, and this one is telling, El Mata Jefes, the boss killer. That last nickname alone tells you everything you need to know about how this man moved through the criminal world. Ruthless, calculated, and not afraid to eliminate anyone standing between him and the top. But before he became the boss himself, Eljardinero had a very specific role. He was the personal security chief to El Mencho, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, the founder and supreme leader of the cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, the CJNG. For years, Eljardinero was the man standing closest to one of the most feared drug lords in modern history. He wasn't just a soldier. He was the last line of defense between El Mencho and any threat that came his way. And that kind of proximity to power teaches you things. It shows you how an empire is run. It shows you how to move, how to hide, how to build. And Eljardinero was paying attention to every single detail. Now here's where things get real interesting. Because Eljardinero didn't just stay in El Mencho's shadow. Over time, he grew. He expanded. He became a regional commander in his own right, controlling enormous swaths of CJNG territory across not 1, not 2, but 5 Mexican states: Zacatecas, Guerrero, Nayarit, Jalisco, and Michoacan. Let that sink in for a second. 5 entire states. That's not a neighborhood. That's not a city. That is a massive chunk of one of the largest countries in the Western Hemisphere, all moving to the rhythm of one man's orders. The U.S. Department of the Treasury, which doesn't throw words around lightly, officially described him in a 2025 designation as a CJNG regional commander in charge of large portions of cartel territory, running clandestine drug laboratories in central Jalisco and southern Zacatecas, producing methamphetamine that was then trafficked directly into the United States. And he commanded a significant number of armed operatives who carried out violence against civilians, law enforcement, and rival cartels across Mexico. So when people say Eljardinero was the second in command of the CJNG, the most powerful cartel in Mexico, present in 21 of the country's 32 states, they are not exaggerating. This man was running a criminal organization that had surpassed even the legendary Sinaloa cartel in terms of geographic reach. And with that kind of territory comes money. Serious, generational, mind-bending money. The kind of money that doesn't sit in a bank account under your own name. The kind of money that needs to disappear and reappear as something clean. Now let's get into what you really came here for. because the lifestyle this man was living, while staying almost completely invisible to the public eye, was something else entirely. Eljardinero wasn't the type to post his cars on Instagram. He wasn't throwing parties with celebrities and letting cameras photograph his mansion. That's amateur hour. That's how you get caught. This man operated on a completely different level. His wealth was hidden, layered, wrapped inside legitimate businesses, shell companies, and a network of frontmen so complex that it took the US, Treasury Department, and multiple Mexican intelligence agencies years just to map it out. And at the center of all that was his chief financial operator, a man known as Cesar Alejandro, alias El Güero Conta. This was basically El Jardinero's personal money manager. His whole job was to take the mountains of cash flowing in from drug operations and make them disappear into the legitimate economy. And he was very, very good at it. So what did all of that money actually look like once it was cleaned up? Let's break it down. First, private aircraft. Plural. And not just for fun. El Jardinero was managing a network of clandestine airstrips along Mexico's Pacific coast, using private planes to move product and personnel in ways that ground transportation simply couldn't match. When you're running a drug empire that spans 5 states and has distribution networks reaching into the United States, you don't drive, you fly. And when you fly under the radar, literally, you do it on private planes from runways that don't appear on any official map. The aircraft weren't just tools, though. In the cartel world, a private plane is a status symbol. It signals to everyone in your organization that you are operating at the highest possible level. Then there's the water, because El Jardinero's territory ran along the Pacific coast, Nayarit, Jalisco, some of the most beautiful coastline in all of Mexico. And on that coastline, you need watercraft. His financial network acquired vessels that served dual purposes, moving product along coastal routes that law enforcement struggled to monitor, and providing the kind of lifestyle that comes with having a private boat docked near Puerto Vallarta. Think about that for a second. Puerto Vallarta, one of Mexico's most glamorous resort cities, was basically in El Jardinero's backyard. And in that backyard, he had boats. Now let's talk about where this man actually slept at night. Through El Güero Conta and a network of shell companies and frontmen, El Jardinero's empire acquired luxury residences. Multiple properties spread across his territory. These weren't regular houses. These were high-value real estate assets, bought specifically to provide secure, comfortable living situations for a man who couldn't exactly put his name on a lease. And here's what people don't always understand about cartel luxury homes. They're not just about comfort. They're about security architecture. Walls, cameras, safe rooms, private entrances. The kind of property where you can see everything and nobody can see you. That's what luxury means when you're one of the most wanted men in 2 countries. Beyond the urban residences, El Jardinero's network controlled ranches, rural properties that served multiple purposes. In the cartel world, ranches are everything. They're where you train personnel, they're where you store weapons and product, they're where you hold meetings that can't happen in a city. They're also where you live like royalty when you need to disappear from the world for a while. Picture rolling land, complete privacy, and the kind of silence that only comes when you own everything around you for miles. That was part of El Jardinero's reality. While investigators were scrambling to track his movements, this man was at a ranch somewhere in western Mexico, completely off the grid. And then there's the one that is genuinely fascinating, the tequila companies, because Jalisco is the heartland of CJNG territory and also, literally, the birthplace of tequila. It's where the agave grows. It's where the distilleries have operated for centuries. It's one of Mexico's most iconic and culturally significant industries. And El Jardinero's financial network was investing in it. His money was flowing into tequila production companies, legitimate, above-board businesses that generated real revenue and provided perfect cover for laundered cartel cash. Every bottle sold through those companies was essentially a clean dollar coming back out. It's not flashy. It doesn't make headlines. But it's exactly the kind of long-term financial thinking that separates a temporary criminal from a genuine empire builder. This is why the DEA and Treasury were sanctioning him. Because this wasn't just a street-level drug dealer who got lucky. This was a sophisticated financial operation running at a scale that most legitimate businesses never reach. And real quick before we keep going, if you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button right now, because we're about to get into how this whole empire started to unravel, the massive military operation it took to bring him down. And the truly humbling way this story ended for one of the most powerful criminals in the world. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, with all this power and all this money, Eljardinero was not invisible to law enforcement. American agencies had been watching him for years, building a file, mapping his network, documenting his assets. In 2021, the U.S. Department of the Treasury officially sanctioned Audius Flores Silva, putting him on the same list as state-sponsored threats and international terrorists. That same year, he completed a 5-year prison sentence for narcotics trafficking. 5 years. And then he went right back to work. That alone tells you something about the man's mindset. Prison wasn't a deterrent. For Eljardinero, it was just a pause. Then in May of 2025, the DEA escalated things dramatically. They issued an international alert, broadcasting his name, his aliases, his photograph to law enforcement agencies around the world, and attached a reward of $5 million for information leading to his capture. $5 million. That's not the kind of bounty you put on someone's small time. That's reserved for people the US government considers genuinely dangerous at a geopolitical level. Meanwhile, in Mexico, this man had already been arrested before. In 2016, he was picked up for allegedly orchestrating an ambush against police officers in Xoyatlan, Jalisco. But he litigated his charges, walked free, and went right back to building. Then in November of 2023, Mexican federal forces mounted a major operation in a residential neighborhood in Zapopan, Jalisco, specifically targeting Eljardinero. They hit the location hard, and he wasn't there. He had slipped out before they arrived. That's the thing about Eljardinero. For years, he was always one step ahead. Always moving, always adapting. In the cat-and-mouse game between him and law enforcement across 2 countries, he kept winning. You think that kind of evasion is luck? It's not. That's a system. A network of informants, loyal soldiers, safe houses, and communication protocols designed specifically to keep him free. He wasn't just hiding. He was operating a counterintelligence operation inside a criminal empire. That's the level this man was at. Now here's where the story shifts permanently. February 22nd, 2026. The Mexican army launched an operation in the town of Tapalpa in southern Jalisco, and when the dust settled, El Mencho was dead. The founder and supreme leader of the CJNG, one of the most wanted drug lords in human history, was gone. And that single moment changed everything for every person in the CJNG's chain of command. Because when the king falls, everyone below him immediately becomes a target and a candidate for the throne. El Mencho's death triggered immediate chaos. A wave of violence erupted across approximately 20 Mexican states. More than 70 people were killed in the aftermath, including 25 members of the Mexican National Guard. That's how significant this transition was. The cartel didn't just quietly reorganize, it exploded. And in the middle of that chaos, Eljardinero made his move. According to Mexico's Secretary of the Navy, after El Mencho's death, Flores Silva began mobilizing personnel, armament, and resources with the objective of seizing control of the criminal organization. He wasn't content to just hold his territory. He wanted the whole thing. But here's where the mistake was made. That kind of movement, shifting resources, consolidating power, reaching out to regional commanders, creates intelligence signals. It creates patterns. And Mexican intelligence, with significant cooperation from US authorities, had already been building their surveillance operation on Eljardinero since October 2024. His sudden increase in activity after El Mencho's death gave them exactly what they needed. This is where it gets truly cinematic. And also where it gets a little humbling for a man who was supposed to be untouchable. Starting from October 2024, the Mexican Navy's Special Forces activated a systematic intelligence operation laser-focused on one target, Audius Flores Silva. Over the following months, they conducted surveillance, field intelligence, analytical work, international cooperation with U.S. agencies, building a complete picture of where Eljardinero was, how he moved, who he talked to, and what his daily patterns looked like. By April 25, 2026, just 2 days before the arrest, they had achieved what the Navy Secretary described as precise identification of the target. They knew exactly where he was. They knew his patterns. They knew who surrounded him. And then they waited for the right moment. April 27, 2026. The operation launched. The scale of it was staggering. Over 500 troops, 6 helicopters, 4 reconnaissance aircraft, multiple planes, all converging on a single point, a cabin near the community of El Mirador in the state of Nayarit. about 12.5 miles north of Puerto Vallarta, right in the heart of his own territory. And when those forces arrived, when the helicopters started circling and the special forces units closed in, here's what they found protecting Eljardinero: 30 pickup trucks and more than 60 armed gunmen, a private army deployed around his cabin in a defensive perimeter. That is the level of security this man was operating with on a normal day. 60 soldiers and 30 trucks, just to protect one person. But it wasn't enough. The Navy described the operation as executed with surgical precision. Eljardinero's escorts scattered in multiple directions, a pre-planned diversion tactic designed to create confusion and allow their boss to slip away in the chaos. It was exactly the kind of evasion strategy that had worked before. Except this time it didn't, because when they scattered, the forces didn't chase them. They tightened the perimeter around the cabin and began systematically searching. And that's when they found him. Audias Flores Silva, El Jardinero, El Comandante, El Mata Jefes, the man with a $5 million bounty on his head, the man who controlled 5 states, the man who owned planes and boats and ranches and tequila companies, was found hiding in a drainage ditch on the side of the road. Not in a safe room, not in an escape tunnel, not on a private jet racing toward a friendly country. In a ditch, trying not to breathe too loud as helicopters circled overhead. And the Navy announced that the entire operation was carried out without a single shot being fired. No gunfight, no dramatic standoff, just 500 troops, 6 helicopters, and 1 man in a ditch who ran out of road. Security Secretary Omar Garcia Harfuch posted the aerial footage to social media almost immediately. You can literally watch it. The helicopters hovering, the ground teams closing in, a figure emerging from the ground. That's Eljardinero. That's how it ended. The same day, just hours later, El Güero Conta, his chief financial operator, and the man who managed all the aircraft and boats and ranches and tequila investments, was arrested in Zapopan, Jalisco. The financial nervous system of Eljardinero's entire empire was dismantled in a single day. Now let's zoom out and talk about what this actually means. Because the arrest of Eljardinero isn't just one man going to jail. It's a seismic event in the global criminal landscape. Former DEA agent Carlos Olivo, who spent years specifically studying the CJNG, said something that stopped a lot of people in their tracks after the arrest. He said this capture would have a greater impact on the operations of the Jalisco New Generation cartel than the removal of El Mencho himself. Think about that. More impactful than the death of the founder. Because El Mencho, toward the end, was largely a symbolic figure, a name, a myth, a flag the organization rallied around. Eljardinero was the operational engine. He was the one actually running things day to day. He was the one with the relationships, the labs, the smuggling routes, the distribution networks reaching into the United States. Mexican security analyst David Saucedo called it a significant blow to the CJNG leadership, which was already in the process of reorganizing after El Mencho's death just 2 months earlier. 2 massive leadership losses in 60 days. That's not a normal stretch for any organization to absorb. And the cartel felt it immediately. After Eljardinero's arrest, violent protests erupted across Nayarit and Jalisco. Vehicles and businesses burned in the streets of CJNG strongholds. That's what happens when an organization loses someone truly central. The rage and fear flow outward and hit innocent people. And that's the part of this story that's genuinely disturbing. Because the consequences of this kind of power and its collapse always seem to fall hardest on regular people who just happen to live in the wrong place. Eljardinero is now in custody and facing extradition to the United States, where he's wanted on drug and firearms charges in Washington, D.C. Given the U.S. government's formal designation of the CJNG as a foreign terrorist organization, the pressure to see him on American soil is enormous. And even with all of this, analysts are careful to point out that cartels adapt, they reorganize, they rebuild, but losing El Mencho and Eljardinero in the same 2-month window is a different kind of pressure than anything the CJNG has faced before. I want to take a second here and just be real about something. Because the billionaire lifestyle framing is accurate, but it also hides something important about how this man actually lived. Eljardinero wasn't living like a tech billionaire. He wasn't on yachts in Monaco. He wasn't attending galas. He was hiding, constantly, moving between safe houses, ranches, and remote cabins, keeping his name off everything, letting frontmen hold his assets because he couldn't put his own name on anything. For all the aircraft and tequila companies and luxury residences, he couldn't sit still long enough to truly enjoy most of it. That's the reality behind the cartel lifestyle that gets romanticized. The money is real, the power is real, but so is the paranoia, so is the isolation, so is the constant awareness that at any moment, 500 troops and 6 helicopters might show up outside your window. And in the end, all of that money, all of that territory, all of those soldiers and trucks and aircraft and companies, none of it was enough to keep him out of a drainage ditch on a road in Nayarit. Think about that every time you see a cartel lifestyle video, and someone makes it look glamorous. The gardener planted a massive empire, but everything he grew eventually got cut down. And speaking of powerful figures who thought they were untouchable, click this video right here because we've got another story lined up that makes even this one look tame. You're going to want to watch it all the way through. See you over there.